Today, it's what you don't know about facilitating meetings. First-time managers, they realize that managing their team is very different from what they thought it would be. The Authentic Leader Show is the podcast for leaders of those managers as they transform first-time managers into leaders of high-performing teams. Now, the question that I get lots of times is, well, Chris, should I start my meeting on time? When I'm leading a facilitating meeting, should I start on time, or should I allow a little time for those people who are many times latecomers and they arrive late, or just should I start on time? So not only, of course, do I coach my clients to lead by example, but of course, I must also lead by example. And my intentional answer is probably not going to be any surprise to you. So my answer is no, never start a meeting late. Make sure that you're always starting a meeting on time. Let me explain to you specifically exactly why to not start a meeting late. First is that starting on time, it honors those people who do arrive on time. People who arrive on time, and when they keep arriving on time, yet a meeting continues to arrive late. Now you're really training those people to, it's okay to arrive late. It doesn't matter if you arrive on time because it's going to start late anyway. If you're consistently starting on time, now you're really telling everyone that the people who do arrive on time, their time is important. You need to honor that. Starting on time also really, it sets a precedence for meetings to start on time when our time is very valuable, and just sitting around waiting for everyone to show up, it's not a good precedence to set, and really starts to also establish your brand as the kind of person who starts meetings on time. That certainly has become my brand, and I consistently will start meetings on time. Starting meetings on time also, it sends a clear message that you do what you commit to do. It demonstrates your professionalism. It exhibits the organization that you have and everything that you bring to what you do. It also really shows that you are dependable and illustrates that you are efficient. Starting on time, it also ensures that you will get through the entire agenda. We'll talk about agenda in just a moment. But if you don't start on time, you risk shortchanging any information that you might share during the meeting, and you may not get to everything that is on your agenda, because you need to make sure you have plenty of time for discussion and for decisions that need to be made during the meeting. And then last thing I'll share here is that starting on time, it establishes accountability for everyone who attends. It really does set a tone for the entire meeting, and it really cements your standard for responsible behavior that you expect at the meeting. What we know, especially when starting out, if you've made this commitment to start your meetings on time, you will still have latecomers. When you have latecomers to attend your meetings, do not do these things. The first one is do not catch up the latecomers. It's disruptive enough that they are showing up late, but even more disruptive when you interrupt the flow of the meeting to catch them up and let them know what it is that they missed out on. If they do arrive late, they start to recognize that they are going to miss out on some information if they don't arrive on time. The second thing I would say is just don't draw attention to it. It's no need to draw attention that someone is late. It really doesn't do you any good, or even the person who shows up late, to point out that they're late. I mean, everybody already knows, including the person who showed up late, that they were late. And really, this is an opportunity for you to demonstrate your professionalism, even for latecomers. However, you don't want to let it slide. Although you shouldn't draw attention to someone who arrives late, ignoring it altogether also does not serve you or the latecomer. Immediately after the meeting, or as soon as you reasonably can, you do want to address the person who is arriving late and let them know that you expect them to be on time for future meetings. What this does by addressing someone who is late, it demonstrates to the other meeting attendees that you will address lateness. You don't want to discipline. This is not really a thing to discipline people on. When you discipline people who are late, and you don't want to come across as someone who is heavy-handed in disciplining someone who shows up late. There might be actually legitimate reasons for people to show up late. So it's important to have a dialogue and a conversation to understand why they're late, but yet also make sure you're clear about addressing the expected behavior. That really should be sufficient in most cases. The key really here is to not overly manage a latecomer, and you want to really maintain their dignity, address the behavior change that you expect to see from them in the future. You don't want to accept habitual lateness. Habitual lateness, that is a performance issue, and that can really bleed into other performance areas. That is not something that should be acceptable, especially if they are a member of your team. You want to make sure that you are preventing a performance issue from becoming a performance issue in the beginning. And one of the things you can address is habitual lateness to meetings that you're facilitating. So make sure that you're establishing what those performance expectations are, including attending and showing up on meetings on time. You want to make sure you're addressing the root cause and not the person. There might be something else that causing them to be habitually late. So let's get to the root cause and let's address that root cause. Last month, I hosted the First Time Manager Summit of the year. I let everyone know ahead of time we will be starting on time for this. So you do not want to be late because it really set the standard for the summit, that we are going to set expectations and we're going to follow through on them. And when we took breaks, because of course we had breaks in the morning and in the afternoon, and of course at lunch too. But at the start of the break, I announced that first off, we were taking a break. So it's very clear right now we're going to be taking a break. And I would also ask, how long do we need for this break? I mean, sometimes the break, we only needed 5 minutes, but other times we may need a little bit longer. As a group, we agreed together how long it would be and what time it would be that we would come back from the break. I let everyone know that I will be starting on time. If one person is here or if everybody's here, I'm starting. It doesn't matter who's here. We are starting on time. And this is really, I find, the easiest time to set that standard before anyone is late. You're not accusing anyone of being late at this point. You're just letting them know this is what's going to happen if you are late. We're starting anyway. Not even one person was ever late from a break. I find it amazing how often people don't have an agenda. People will argue with me and say, well, Chris, I don't have time to have an agenda. We've got to have this quick meeting. You always have time to at least have a basic agenda. What are the 3 or 4 key points that we need to discuss? What are key decisions that need to be made at this meeting? If you can't articulate even the most basic information, do you really need a meeting? A big thing people get caught up on is taking notes for the meeting. I think that it's very good practice to establish a note taker for the meeting. Nobody wants to be the note taker because it can feel like it's a lot of work to take notes, and it doesn't have to be a lot of work. The person who's facilitating and leading the meeting should not also be the note taker. So if you're facilitating the meeting, just transparently share that it's very difficult to both facilitate a meeting and also record by writing and taking notes. However, taking notes does not have to be that difficult. There's really only 2 things that need to be recorded when taking notes. First are, what are the key decisions that were made during the meeting? You don't need to record everything that was discussed. What was the end decision that was made with each decision? Be clear about this is the decision that's made, because then you can go back and just look at what were decisions made. You don't need to go back and recap and re-look at and even reread how you got to the decision. That doesn't matter. That's for the people who were there. We know how we got to the decision, but just record what the decision that's made. So that's the first thing that you take when you're taking notes. The second thing to record when you're taking notes is, what are the actions that were committed during this meeting? Who is going to take the action? When will that work be done? And I always like to ask the person doing the work when they think it will be done by. And then lastly is very clearly describe the result that should be produced from the action. So when taking notes, it's the decisions that were made and then the actions. With the actions comes who, when, and the result that is being produced. For those who really want to up their meeting facilitation game, you can additionally ask, if you're really serious about this, you can ask participants to evaluate the effectiveness of today's meeting. For today's meeting, how did we do? How effective were we at meeting the objectives of this meeting? Did we get to everything on the agenda? If we didn't, why didn't we get to them? What are some things that we could do better for next time? How can we improve? What are the incremental changes we can make so that our next meeting is a valuable use of our time, and even more valuable use of our time? To recap what we've talked about here today, make sure that you are establishing a reputation and even a standard for starting on time. Be that person that, hey, when Chris starts meetings, he always starts his meetings on time. When people are late, because you know they're going to be late, make sure you do not catch them up. No need to draw attention to their lateness. Don't let it slide. Make sure you're addressing when someone is late and letting them know that you recognize that they were late and you expect them to do better next time. Do not want to discipline them for being late. And then lastly, make sure that you are seriously addressing people who are habitually late, because that can, again, lead into and bleed into performance issues later down the road. Always make sure that you have an agenda. Do not have a meeting unless you have at least a basic agenda. Make sure that someone other than you who's facilitating the meeting records the decisions and the actions that were taken and assigned at the meeting. Consider maybe even evaluating your meeting, and use your meeting as a developmental tool for future managers. If you'd like to see if your first-time manager qualifies for the First Time Manager Summit, you can learn more at AuthenticSuccessOnline.com. Now, our February First Time Manager Summit that I mentioned earlier, it was a great success, and you do not want to miss the next First Time Manager Summit that is coming up in the spring of 2023. If you can relate to anything that I shared here today, or if you'd like to ask me any questions, I would really love to talk with you. You can put a comment right here and I will respond. You can also DM me or reach out to me through my LinkedIn profile. You can connect with me on LinkedIn at I am Christopher Jones. You can also find more information and other free resources when you go to ChristopherRJones.com. Hey, I want to thank you for joining us today. Please come back next week for another episode.